Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Tom Cooper. I am director of the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction and one of the communities that tested basic income back in 2017, 2018. Today, we have a very exciting program for you. So I'd like to give you a little bit of a brief overview on Crowdcast before we get started. If you'd like to submit a question to the speakers, Elaine or Craig, please post in the Ask a Question section down below. You may also note on the questions already posted by other attendees, you can vote on those. So this will help determine me as the moderator which questions to prioritize, but hopefully we'll be able to get to as many as possible. Next, there's a chat box where you can hold side conversations, and if you've been to a few sessions before, I'm sure this is all old hat to you. So in order to keep things moving, we may not get around to responding to the activity in the chat room, but we'll be sure to pose any questions that we don't get to Elaine and Craig, and maybe could do some follow-up later. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our terrific duo of speakers. Elaine Power is a professor in the School of Kinesiology and Health Studies and head of the Department of Gender Studies at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. She's also co-author with Jamie Swift of The Case for Basic Income, Freedom, Security, and Justice. You know what, I have a copy right here with me. And a founding member of the Kingston Action Group for Basic Income Guarantee. Craig Bergold is a video editor, research assistant, and website designer on the No One Left Behind social media campaign at Queen's University. Craig is a PhD candidate in cultural studies. He is a media artist and a key organizer at the Ontario Basic Income Network for the Case for Basic Income and the Arts campaign. So I'm going to turn my screen over to them and look forward to hearing what they have to say. So Elaine, I think you're up first.
Great. Thanks so much, Tom. And thanks everyone for joining us. I'm in Kingston, Ontario, which is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples and part of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Treaty. And I'm going to try sharing my screen and we'll keep our fingers crossed that it works. Right now, let's see here. Okay, window, let's see, share. Can you let me know, Craig, if this is it working?
Not yet.
Okay. Let's try again. Doesn't want to share. Is it sharing?
No, we just see you.
Okay. This isn't so good. Not a good start to the morning. Let's try it again.
Do we maybe want to try with Craig going first, and Elaine, maybe you can, or would it mess up the continuity of the presentation?
Yeah, I don't think it's, oh man. So the idea was that I was going to set them up, and so maybe I'll just talk, and then
okay.
Craig can show his videos. So
okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to share some of the research that went into this social media campaign, which began, I think I was able to get some money from Queen's University for what was called a COVID Rapid Response Grant. And so the money was used to, to do some research about people who were left behind in the COVID economic response. So for those of you who might not be in Canada, our federal government launched what was called the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, also colloquially known as CERB, within a couple of weeks, actually, of the pandemic starting up. And it was meant for people who lost their jobs because of COVID. And it was set at about $2,000 a month, and it ran, I think, until September. Initially, that was a shorter time. And we had lots of fine words from our Prime Minister about, we're all in this together and we're going to support each other and pull through together. And of course, that language, that rhetoric was hiding a lot of things. So we know that there were some sectors that were especially affected by COVID: tourism, hospitality, the arts, culture, retail. These many of the jobs that were affected were low wage and precarious. And of course, women, racialized groups, young people, and recent immigrants were among those most affected. So although CERB did an amazing thing to support households and to keep the economy afloat, about 16% of jobless Canadians were ineligible for a variety of reasons. So the CERB was a kind of basic income. It was, but it was conditional. You had to meet certain conditions, and not everybody was eligible. So Craig and I have known each other for a while now, and we decided this was a good opportunity to feature some of the stories of the people who were left out. So the people who were not included in our Prime Minister's declarations of all being in this together. And so we were trying to find people who would agree to participate in the research. We ended up actually recruiting a number of people who were on social assistance, and the CERB and social assistance worked differently in different provinces. In many provinces, anybody who received CERB got their social assistance benefits clawed back dollar for dollar. Only 3, the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and BC exempted CERB from social assistance. But many of the people we recruited actually were on social assistance or on disability benefits. And so, and what we came to see was that while CERB was a lifeline for many people, for others it created a lot of uncertainty, and some people were left out altogether. So people on social assistance in particular really felt the sting of trying to live on less than half of CERB, sometimes much less than half of CERB, and really felt left out. So the purpose of our research was to document and analyze those experiences, but built into the research design and application was the idea that we would use these results to inform a social media campaign, to set up a website, and to do other activities to contribute to the basic income campaign, because we didn't actually hide that that's what we wanted this research specifically for advocacy. So we were able to recruit 28 people in total using social media, and people from all over the country, from Newfoundland literally to northern BC. We also kind of lucked into another research participant, a medical student who was working at a street clinic in Kenora, which is a northern community in Ontario, and most of his participants were Indigenous. So these were people who were mostly weren't housed and were living pretty rough lives. So he ended up doing interviews with 12 people from that clinic as well. So we did interviews. I did interviews, George and I, between about half an hour to 2 hours, and I guess in hindsight, it wasn't that surprising, but only 6 of them agreed to be video recorded. And we were really hoping that we could get lots of people to be recorded using Zoom, to be video recorded, so then Craig could work with their interviews to develop a social media campaign. In hindsight, I guess it's not that surprising that many people had lots of good reasons why they didn't want to be video recorded. In terms of some of the results, one of the things that came up over and over again was housing, and the high cost of housing, and the terrible circumstances that people found themselves in because they couldn't afford housing. So I think for me, one of the lessons from this research is that, yes, we need basic income, but as we've long said in Canada, we need a lot more than basic income and an affordable housing policy is certainly one of them. So Kelly, for example, who was 61 and was working 2 part-time jobs, said, so for now I have my rent paid for this month and I don't know what I'm going to do come December. I don't know where I'm going from here. And Tina, who was 28 on a disability pension, said, it was really hard. I'm almost going to cry thinking about it. It's been 4 years. Losing that apartment really messed up my life. So for over a year, I moved around from room to room. I moved 7 times in a year. Nancy, who was in Newfoundland, was in rent geared to income housing and paying 25% of her net income. And she said, I was fortunate to be able to get a small 1-bedroom apartment with a den. I'm so thankful for that. I can't even describe to you the peace of mind knowing that you actually have somewhere to live for the rest of your life. Your rent is 25% of your net income. And lots of people told us just horror stories about, landlords and roommates and really terrible situations in housing. Not surprisingly, the COVID pandemic really worsened people's mental health. So one person said, when I'm not working 2 jobs, I'm looking for a job that's not there. It's constant stress and worry. What will you do if you don't have a place? And like I said, I feel lucky. I see people downtown with their shopping carts and I don't know their stories. I see the people in my community struggling every day. I've been trying 8-10 years now. I don't seem to get up the ladder or even stay at my level. So if you can't see anything, you give up hope. I've been suicidal. And I think there's a session right now happening at the same time about mental health and the benefits of basic income on mental health. We also asked people to imagine if they were eligible for getting CERB, the $2,000 a month. And of course, because in Canada, there were over 7 million people on CERB, so this was something that people were thinking about quite a bit. Christine, who's 63 and was working multiple jobs, said, right now I don't feel stable. I have a hard time getting out of bed because I'm discouraged and depressed. I wouldn't feel those things anymore and the pressure of constantly looking for a job. I could be more mentally and emotionally alert to what's happening around me and where I need to plug into somebody. Oh, somebody's sick, I'll take them over a casserole. It maintains dignity when people show compassion for each other and builds up resilience of the entire community when everyone feels like they've got the stability and they're not going to fall through the cracks. And so over and over, we heard stories like this. This again is Nancy, the woman in Newfoundland. She said, oh, goodness gracious, what a difference. For one, I'd be able to pay for my dental care that I so desperately need right now. I'd be able to have some kind of transportation. I wouldn't have to worry about paying for my non-prescription medications. It's like so much money to me. She couldn't even really express herself. She said, I don't even that to me right now would be almost like winning the lottery. I can't even fathom how good it would be. My own transportation, groceries, gosh, I would be able to buy actual meat and eggs and dairy products, fresh fruit and vegetables, and actually be able to make meals. We also asked people about if basic income would make them lazy. And so this is Tim, an Indigenous man from Kenora, who said, I don't even have a chance to be lazy, right? I got to carry around a big, huge bag. I'm kind of sleepwalking from place to place. People think that it'll make us lazy. I would say, try to come down here, even this is Kenora. This is on a smaller spectrum of a hard life, but it's pretty rough. Even coming down here for a couple of hours a day for a week would be probably too much for most people. I don't think it would make us lazy. I think it would make us grateful. And then Kelly, who was working 2 part-time jobs, said, if I wasn't constantly thinking about what to do next, I'd be volunteering. I could maybe solve some worldly problem, but I don't have time to do anything except think, how am I going to survive? So maybe communities would get together and help each other. They do that in times of wildfires and floods and things like that. Maybe we could become better and bring out the goodness in people who aren't so stressed. There was one person, one of the people who was at the street clinic, who thought that other people would spend their money, other addicts would spend their money on drugs and probably OD and party. But this person, we called her Rachel, said she didn't think she would do that. She says, probably, there'd probably be a shit show out there, honestly. But if I'm speaking for myself and my family, yeah, it would be beneficial as hell. So I think that's, also speaks to the need for other services, particularly around addictions and mental health. So we know that our Prime Minister is not a supporter of basic income. We're trying to work to build up social, the support among people to put pressure on our politicians. I think there's a panel later this afternoon about some of the politicians who are already on board. Alicia Garza, who's the co-creator of the Black Lives Matter movement, has said that if any of us are left behind, we have failed. And so I would, I'm with her. I think if anyone's left behind, we failed. And I really want to thank the people who were courageous enough to share their stories, especially those on video. And Craig is going to take it over from here and talk about the social media campaign that, as I say, was built into the research design right from the outset. So with that, Craig, it's all over to you. Where did you go, Craig?
Craig, are you still with us? If you've minimized your camera, you just have to mouse over the icon in the bottom left corner of your screen. It'll give you an option to maximize it again and unmute yourself. Okay, it looks, oh, here he is.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, I saw and heard everything, Elaine. That was great. Thank you so much for this opportunity to work with you. I'm going to say a few words, and then I'm going to share my screen and show some of the videos. So I'm in the city of Kingston, Ontario, Canada, the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, and I pay my respect to the elders and offer my solidarity. I also want to acknowledge that today is June 19th, Juneteenth Day, and it's a big, important day commemorating the abolition of slavery in the USA. Here in Canada, we recognize the end of slavery on August 1st, which was in 1834 when the British Parliament passed the Slavery Abolition Act. Shortly after the great Jamaican slave revolt that precipitated that action. So I just want to acknowledge this special day. For me, who's involved with this, all my life with anti-poverty work and social justice, the importance of racial and justice is integral to that, and Indigenous rights too. So thank you for those opportunities. So working with, so my lived experience is when I was a young man, I was a single father, and I was on social assistance. I've been an artist, I've been a teacher, worn many hats. I've been, experienced precarity. But I've also had success, so I go back and forth like many people. And it was very interesting to be a part of Elaine's research in a small part. So in listening to people's stories, and I want to share some of those stories that we put on video. But I think for me, what really I recall is just how punitive the government social assistance disability programs are and how they punish people and trap people in poverty. I know from my own experience when I was a young man, going to the welfare office and asking for support was very difficult, and the shame that the social workers would try to impose on you, especially when you're younger. I think when young people go to these offices, there's a lot of like, oh, you're lazy, you should just get out there, and not really understanding that many people have different experiences that get them there in poverty. So when I heard the stories that I'm going to share with you, that was one of the things that came across to me, was just how degrading the existing programs are to people's mental health, and how the existing program. So for me, my personal experience is that, basic income is about removing that kind of means testing. I mean, I support income testing, but I don't support all the other stuff that government agencies do in order to get the crumbs that they give us. And CERB, like Elaine was talking about, it provided $2,000 to 8 million people, which was 1/3 of the Canadian workforce. And all the people who were on disability and social assistance at the exact same time, on welfare, you're getting $735 a month, and on disability, it might be around $1,200. I mean, depending on your circumstance, but it was always less than the $2,000 that CERB was getting. So it created this kind of like deserving and undeserving. And again, that for me is what basic income is about, is trying to eradicate that narrative, that story, that there's some who are deserving and some who are undeserving. So I want to share my screen now. So let me see how that goes. So can you see my screen?
Yeah, looks good, Craig.
Great. Okay, so after Elaine did the research, I built this website. So there's a link in the chat. And the first thing that we did is we wanted a place where people could go to find out about the project and what was being required of them. So they could go to the website, read the ethics, read the applicant consent form, read Elaine's research, and just be, like clearly demonstrate what it was that we were trying to do, so that when people were sharing their personal stories, they understood the context. And so we pay, in the grant application, it was a $40 honorarium for each volunteer. And we were specifically looking for people who did not receive the federal CERB payment. And then we started tweeting out, tweeting and using our networks to get people to come forward. And so Elaine would do the research. So you could actually read the information consent form before you, so you understood what was going on. So Elaine would do the research and do the interviews with people, and they were usually about an hour long. And I think so what I did was I then tried to take the interviews and cut them down into 1 and 2 minute stories. And these are just examples of some of the people you're going to meet, and I'm going to show you some of the videos. And we tried to kind of brand it and have a look to it for social media. I think the campaign, we've reached over, we launched this about a month ago or 5-6 weeks ago, and I think we have about 10,000 views now on the videos. And they're posted on Twitter, Facebook, and we also collaborate with other Canadian basic income groups to get the message out and share them. So these are just screenshots from the video. So I think we're going to go right in and hear the story of Tyra now.
Right now, I'm making minimum wage, so I'm making $14.65. If I'm sick and I lose my work hours, then I don't get paid. If I lose even one day of work, $20 or $30 could mean me making rent or not. And affordable housing is really hard to find right now. Well, if we had a safety net, people would be more motivated to go to work. They wouldn't feel scared to lose their job just based off of the tiniest things that they do. They wouldn't feel scared to go to work and have that kind of looming anxiety that most people have when they leave the house for their job, when they don't have the money. Everyone is scared to kind of lose their jobs literally every single day. And if we had that safety, it would make us less scared. At $2,000 a month, just to cover all of my expenses, I'd probably have a little bit more just to be comfortable and be able to kind of live, which is what I go to work to do, but I don't get to.
If I had still been on basic income, or if that had existed, I would not have been trapped in a relationship that I no longer wanted to be in, and neither would my partner at the time. His income was taken off of my check. He did not have enough money to exit the relationship, and going down to a single person's amount on ODSP, you can't afford to live on your own either. No one can move on at that point. You're really stuck and trapped in a situation you don't want to be in and can't afford to leave. And the only thing stopping you is the finances.
My children and I are survivors of domestic violence. When we left that abusive relationship, we had to live in a shelter for a temporary time. At that time, I had to go on Ontario works, and I was completely stressed out, and I was dehumanized at that circumstance. I have a PhD in history, but at that time, I couldn't work due to the post PTSD. And when I went to the Ontario works, told them that I hope to study law and continue my education. They didn't believe me. My social worker didn't get it at all. Like, what's the point for you to go back to school? You still need to find a job. So, like, I couldn't get any support for my law school admission test, which was $200. And it was a huge barrier for me. And eventually I made it. Now I'm a first-year law school student. But I just feel, this is unnecessary for those people who are already crushed in their personal life, and they're going to be crushed by the social welfare system again. This is so unfair. That's why I support basic income project.
Okay, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's great, Craig.
Okay, so if you go to the website, you can view, there's 6 videos. These are the subjects: domestic violence, disability benefits, minimum wage, caregivers, social assistance. So I've shown you 3 of the 6. We, like Elaine was saying, there's a, like Elaine said, there's a certain amount of shame that people feel often when they receive government assistance, and so they're reluctant to step forward. I just wanted to end by saying that make sure you get Elaine's book. So here's, you can go to Between the Lines. And later today at 4 o'clock, I'm giving a talk on the Basic Income Arts Campaign. So I hope you can join us for that 4 o'clock presentation. And this is a drawing by my daughter. I talked so much about the precarious that she illustrated it for me. And so I think that's it for my comments. I think the one thing I'll close with is how each of the speakers that you met today in telling their stories talked about how the existing government programs are degrading and punitive. And I think for me, what basic income offers is the hope that that kind of intrusive behavior of the state is removed in order for there to be income security and for us to have a more modern version of what is basically Victorian poor laws from the 1800s. So thank you so much. And thank you, Elaine, for opportunity to work with you.
Thank you, Craig. It's been such a delight to have this collaboration. It's really, I hope it's made more effective use of the research, which normally goes into an academic journal article that nobody reads.
Well, like I said, I think we had about 10,000 views in a month in sharing the videos. I guess the challenge, Elaine, and maybe Tom, you have some thoughts, is how do we break out of the kind of echo chamber that we're in, right? Because we want 100,000 likes, we want 100,000 views.
Yeah, and that was actually going to be the basis for my first question, Craig. Has there been beyond the perhaps usual suspects who might watch and share the videos in the campaign? Have you heard back from any unusual suspects who might have finally got it, that we are, at least for the last 18 months at least, we're existing in really what was a two-tiered income security system? And as you so rightly pointed out, the federal government provided $2,000 a month in CERB, which is a recognition of what people need to live on. And yet there, here in Ontario, as one example, there's 900,000 people trying to subsist on woefully inadequate provincial social assistance programs. If you're in Ontario Works, as you pointed out, $733 a month. If you're on Ontario Disability Support Program, $1,169 a month. So nowhere close to CERB. So has there been any feedback about really that situation and what people are willing to do about it?
Elaine, do you want to go, or?
Well, I don't think I have anything hopeful to say, really. I would say not so much with the social media campaign and the videos, but in some of June is conference month for academics, and I've been to a couple of other conferences where, particularly related to food studies, which is part of my work around food insecurity, that I think I've made a few converts in the skeptical left camp around basic income, but it feels very slow and very well, to use a word that Craig uses a lot, very precarious. I think one of my biggest disappointments in this movement is the lack of uptake on the left of people who are skeptical of basic, and the refusal to engage. It's not even just I'd be happy to engage with them, but there's like this refusal to listen. So I feel like I made a few converts among that group in the last few weeks, but unfortunately unrelated to the social media campaign. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Craig. I mean, I think it really is an echo chamber.
I think lived experience makes a big difference. So there are people on the left. I see a lot of traditional leftists who are out of academia or out of well-paid union jobs who don't have the lived experience. And what ends up happening is we create this false narrative that there are deserving workers and undeserving workers, and that retired people and people on social assistance are somehow not workers. What I have come to understand as an artist and is that all paid labor, any kind of income from paid labor, is based on unpaid work. There is no wages without unpaid work. And the left has chosen to only organize those who make wages. And what about, because when you're talking about people on disability, when you're talking about people on, like, they are workers who have special needs, and the work of being poor is immense. Going to secondhand shops, cutting coupons, like the lived experience of being poor is somehow people have chosen to speak for the poor on the left. Yeah. Without actually letting the poor speak. So when you hear the left say, oh, join a union and fight for minimum wage, I'm a union president. I've been union president at Queen's University. I am deeply involved in the trade union movement. And yes, we need a strong labor movement, but that does not deal with those million people that Tom talked about that are on social assistance. And you know what? Doubling the rate of social assistance is great, but that doesn't fix a broken system that keeps us trapped in poverty. And so there are anti-poverty activists on the left who claim to speak for the poor. And I won't name them. I think we all know who we're talking about. And they have long histories of activism, and they're well respected. But they're not talking about replacing a system. They're afraid that the neoliberals are going to come in and privatize that system. I understand that argument, but I'm not willing to stop the fight for freedom of choice, because the more you're outside the norm, whether you're trans, gay, disabled, whatever, when you're outside the so-called norm, you need cash to solve your problems, because services are also part of the patriarchal system that these services were designed a long time ago, and they're just not modern anymore. We need a new system. And it's not enough to say, oh, I'm afraid the neoliberals are going to privatize everything if we go down this path. We have to fight for the basic income we want.
Well said, Craig. And excellent points. And you'll see in the chat there's agreement there as well from Kendall and Jane and others. And Kendall has posted an article actually looking at CERB and social assistance rates that I had the pleasure of collaborating on with some researchers at McMaster University. One of the before we get to the audience questions in the few minutes we have, one of the big sort of reflections of that work was really the health disparities between people who were receiving CERB and getting $2,000 a month and those who had to remain on provincial social assistance programs. We're in the deadliest pandemic in 100 years. What were some of the reflections you heard from participants you interviewed about health during the pandemic, about their personal, physical, and mental health?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Tom. I mean, it won't surprise you that, people, the isolation was devastating to people. The kinds of services that people relied on, the community centers, the community or agencies that they relied on, many of them were closed. So people found that they had higher expenses because they had to get, masks and cleaning supplies and all the rest. Their usual supports were either gone or disrupted, and they have no money to participate in anything. So and especially for people, I think almost all of the people we interviewed were living alone. So the isolation was just devastating. So the anxiety, the uncertainty of the pandemic on top of their existing poverty and mental illness in many cases really made things much worse for people. Yeah. So, and I just also want to pick up on, and this is a little bit of a sidebar, but not really. I think, the rhetoric from the unions and from the left critique of basic income, I think we need to start using the language of ableism, right? And that there's a lot of ableism, that the lack of recognition of the work that people do that's unpaid, that is the most that they can do, that many people cannot hold full-time, are never going to be able to hold full-time jobs. And that is completely invisible, I think, in that rhetoric of, well, we need higher paying jobs and we need more union jobs. Yes, yes, we need to raise the minimum wage, but that's not enough, and it's not going to be enough. So anyway, I think we can, we would pay for this so quickly in healthcare costs. I think that's one of the places where Canada is so different from the US because of our healthcare system, that we pay for it in taxpayer dollars. And we know that about 20% of our healthcare costs are directly related to poverty. So it's a real, for in Canada, that's something that's very different from the situation in the US.
Thanks, Elaine. I'm going to get to, we have 3 minutes left, so I'm going to get to a couple of questions that were posted. So one was from Jane. There's been so much work done on the problems and powerful experience. In terms of the way forward, do we need to start empowering voices and remind ourselves of critical individual rights? So in terms of all those fantastic people you interviewed and their powerful stories, do you think we need to be doing more of that in our society? Maybe I'll ask Craig.
So last year, very short, I put forward a proposal at NABIG that was canceled to do a workshop on social media memes and basic income. And at that time, one of the things I noticed was there was a lot of, basic income like memes that are like famous people or academics, and they're always saying something good about basic income, or it's Martin Luther King, or, but it wasn't the poor. It wasn't the people who they were claiming to, speak for. And I do think like Jessie Gollum's photography show, she was on basic income. She's used her camera to tell the story of those people. I think we need to get more and more people. We need more and more leadership from the people who would benefit. And the anti-poverty movement needs to ask the academics to step aside. Sorry, Elaine. And and I say that as somebody who kind of straddles both fences, right? I'm an academic as well, but I've also have lived experience. So I think there needs to be more of a balance there, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I agree. I think I was on the panel yesterday about storytelling and the power of stories. And the words. I mean, we've seen. I think throughout this Congress, the film, the documentary film on Thursday night, how powerful those stories are, and the words and the experiences of people living in poverty, and the ability, I think, to sidestep some of the resistance to hearing about whether the data, the quantitative data, the stats, and all of the rest. So yeah.
And I think the wrath of the pandemic has shown that, you know, unfortunate circumstances can happen to good people, you know, and so that has opened up an empathy channel that people, like, what used to be outside the box is now the mainstream, which is like anybody can experience this kind of insecurity and precarity. And we see that, like, in the arts sector, you know, lots and lots of people who had, you know, jobs and they just don't have them now, and it's through no fault of their own. So that creates a solidarity with those who are outside.
My co-author likes to refer to that as the democratization of insecurity.
There you go. Unfortunately.
Yeah, sadly, but we have come to the end of our time. I think that was a really good way to end it, and it's fabulous discussion, a fabulous initiative. So thank you both, Elaine, Craig. We look forward to seeing more in the future and sharing the videos that have been posted in the chat, which I will certainly be doing. So thanks, everybody, and look forward to seeing you later on in the day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.